I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
Jared, let me just ask you a question, brother. First of all, and I don't, again, I'm not hearing anything I disagree with in terms of our ultimate objectives.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about tactics. And again, I could be wrong. I mean, of course. And I wasn't, even in everything I've said before, in this exchange, when I talk about judicial, you talk about court decisions, I haven't heard you say anything about anything I said, including the critique of the extent to which any of that stuff can be.
No, I did. I said I have asked for evidence that would show that
I
the
mean, I
arguments
talked
you've made
about,
about supporting have helped
let's
the
just take one.
collective
I mean,
materially. So I did.
restrictive covenants, for or against.
Again, how has that helped the material condition overall of the Black community? It hasn't. It's
Okay, all
gotten
right,
worse.
well, good. All
So
right,
that one
all right.
issue has been
Okay, so then
insufficient. That's all I'm saying.
maybe, and I'm not even know that we're disagreeing. And that's good. When you say the material condition of the Black community, I guess when I hear that, I'm trying to process what that means, for lack of a better term. Please don't be offended. In the real world, in other words, we say the Black community, the material condition of the Black community. For example, Obama. And again, I interact on Roland Martin because people watch it. Again, and I'm certainly not a fan of quoting Lenin, but I'm using Lenin the way that Abdul used Lenin. In other words, we could have ideological clarity in a small circle and keep taking the L in the larger society, or we could continue to build in the small circle and continue to try to be in these other spaces and push people. And so if you watch, and I'm not saying anybody should watch it, I'm very clear about audiences and how audience differ. There's nobody consistently more critical of that neoliberal Democratic Party in that particular space, not this space. That's a given. Than I am in those conversations when Obama comes up. But let me just, and this isn't defending Obama administration, but I would say, and again, now I don't know whether you would categorize this as individuals, as distinct from specifics applying to groups of people. But if you are in the class, maybe this will help bridge it. If you're in the class of person who might have been arrested for crack cocaine or possession with intent to distribute, let's say like Ketanji Brown Jackson's blood uncle, one of the women who's being considered to be appointed, who she ain't say much, although she was on the Sentencing Guideline Commission appointed by Obama. Let's say you're the Attorney General appointed by Obama, nominated and confirmed, Eric Holder, who told his prosecutors, do not seek the maximum sentencing. In fact, do not prosecute. If you are someone who worked in the federal courts during that period, then you could come in this space and say, I saw lives that could have been thrown in the trash. Now, maybe these are individuals. I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I'm trying to get to some common ground. We're talking that weren't thrown in the trash because the prosecutors came in and said, we were told not to charge for this. Now, that's not caping for Obama. It's certainly not caping for Obama and Eric Holder. But I am saying that that's different than this nut who was the Attorney General under Trump when they're out there clearing squares. Now, Black Lives Matter. I mean, everything you named, I'm in full agreement, but I'm saying it's more complicated than being ideologically consistent in the broad sense, because we all understand the structural critiques. Now, on the ground, on the material reality, the lived experiences of Black folk, if we want to narrate that as a bunch of individuals and perhaps even ideologically say that these people are just going to have to suffer until this, until these contradictions are heightened to the point where there will be a structural rebellion, I'm there for the conversation. We have to think through that. But I think there's something to be gained in learning from past struggles, which is why I kept evoking a few of those struggles from the past, which constantly bring us back to this point. How do we move forward from this point? Because quite frankly, in a few months, they're going to be 2022 midterm elections. And I am chastened. I hear you. I absolutely do. to be much more mindful and much more careful in terms of how I have these conversations. I absolutely respect that, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm also aware that if Brian Kemp is reelected in Georgia, that's serious business. I don't know. I'd rather have Stacey Abrams as the governor or Brian Kemp.
But maybe you keep doing that. That's not again, that's not my point. You keep doing the thing of would you rather have. So
no,
so
my point would be,
so because obviously, so because anybody could do that. I mean, I could get real, we could be silly and start saying, well,
I'm not being silly. I'm literally trying
I'm saying we could get silly, and I could say things like, well, how do any of those cases impact Mike Brown, who still got killed by a cop? Or how does that, so my point is so what I'm really trying to say is if I don't, so for instance, when you talk about the historical examples that I think you keep leaving out are those among the most radical and rebellious, and the ones with the most even the ones who are most clear in their radical ideology, even to be part of the conversation as you make your own argument that concludes as you do. You don't have to leave out those historical examples either. And you don't have to leave out the historical examples of their arguments as to why they did not advocate the vote, or at least make that a primary, or argue for the lesser of evil, when they engage the vote. So you could mention the rebellions of the enslaved. You could mention RAM and RNA. You could talk about Dr. King's arguments around the, electoral politics. Malcolm X's. I don't hear that. That's all that's so like, I don't feel like when you say, I don't, this point again about that is again this dismissive refrain of the left just want to be ideologically pure while I'm in the streets dealing with the realities of the world. That's not what I'm advocating. What I'm advocating is that as a master teacher who knows these traditions and histories, that you bring them into your discussions with those communities. It's not about, because I don't think that, as you said, I don't think that, you mentioned building in a small circle. I don't think that as you are in this bigger pond, that when you advocate the same line as every other mainstream Democrat or conservative, that is helping build. So that's all I'm saying. So what
did I say to advocate as any other mainstream liberal or conservative?
That has been my argument the whole night. That has been the whole reason why I wanted to sit down with you, is that because when you tell people to shut up, when you tell people who are advocating what
what policy did I advocate that's traditionally liberal?
No, I said the policy. No. The traditionally liberal advocacy for that we vote for the lesser of evils by voting for the Democratic Party to prevent some Nazi worse right wing, which I'm arguing historically has led us to these worse and worse and worse. The only reason we have a Trump is because we've been voting for the lesser of evils for however many decades.
So in other words, is it better to have a Trump? I'm just asking. I'm just asking. I don't know.
I'm not saying it's better to have a Trump. What I'm saying is hold on. Let me answer that. So what I'm saying is, just as Glenn Ford had argued, I mentioned him earlier today, we brought the Democratic Party is the more effective evil. They're not the lesser of evil. They're the more effective evil. So what I'm actually saying is that by voting for them over time, that is what led us to Trump. I'm not saying that I would rather have Trump or Trump is better. I'm saying the reason we had to suffer a Trump is because we have not changed our voting patterns well enough. We have not organized ourselves well enough. We have not used our platforms to advocate for a different form of engagement well enough so that we could prevent. So now we're going to have to deal probably with another Trump or worse.
Well, walk me through it.
After voting for the lesser of evil this last time.
Walk us through it. I mean, because good. This is straight tactic. This is straight strategy, and I ain't claiming to be in the streets for no, not at all.
Well, you were talking about being in the, talking about the,
No, I mean, and this isn't a matter
Roland Martin's street community of audience.
This is not a matter of us talking about bona fides. I mean, and although some of it is, I'm old enough now. I was an undergrad when Jesse ran president the first time. It's a very different conversation in 84 to 88. When I was in law school, we were going to Atlanta because it was going to be a brokered convention. Remember, Dukakis didn't have it, and Jesse sold everything out. He got his son, Joe Lewis' son, all them on the Democratic National Committee. Ron Brown became the chair of the Democratic National Committee. That's what led to Bill Clinton. So I'm saying some of this stuff is not based on, it is being there and seeing, in addition to the other stuff. This is when Farrakhan, the second rise, as they say in the Nation of Islam, all that stuff is there. But But that's not what I'm saying. I think we're at this moment now, we're talking tactics and strategies. And this is all really, so what would you advise then in these midterm elections? I hear people beating up on Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, none more than me. However, being very clear that that was always going to happen. Capital is always involved in these conversations, and those two clowns are absolutely wholly owned subsidiaries. Manchin of obviously oil and gas industry and all the energy industry, and Sinema, all the billionaires except one who support her live outside Arizona, so we know what that is. Now, coming up for 2022, we're in 2022 now, 2022 and then 2024, the next election cycles in which there will be no third party that can be organized to seize power or even create a plurality. So what's your thinking on how Black people in the United States should engage in the electoral process, not broadly, theoretically, not we've come to this place because of mistakes we made in the past, but between February 2022 and November 2022? What's your thinking? Because I want to hear it.
I'm glad you asked. So I understand the reality of the situation. I understand where we are. So I'm simply advocating that more of us begin to advocate more strongly, that we begin to develop different ways of engaging the electoral political system. So I don't know exactly what people should do in this next midterm. I would not advocate voting for any of the major parties, but what I would advocate is that we develop, even if it is sort of an unofficial gathering called the after party. With the big beautiful concept that no matter what parties exist, the after party is always better, and that we engage it and we develop as again, shout out to the late Glenn Ford, the bright lines of what the basic minimums of what it means to be either a candidate that represents us or a campaign that we would want to support more broadly are these bright lines. So we would have, for instance, it has to be overtly anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist. It has to have the campaign and candidacies have to guarantee that they'll vote for Medicare for all, that there will be abolition and dual power developed, that nonviolent criminals would be immediately released from prison, political prisoners would all be released and paid reparations, redistribution of the GDP, or which is my preference to reparations, that there be a mandate that billionaires be the existence of billionaires be illegal, and that we have a debt jubilee across the board immediately. So with that basic level of a platform, we start to advocate that this be the basis that we engage electoral politics, whether again as a separate party or blocks within the Democratic Party or whatever. And again,
so somebody like, for example, Anita Turner, who wouldn't have all of that on the list, but would have some of that on the list. So
look,
like,
I don't know enough.
That's a concrete example. I mean, she's in the Democrat. She's a registered Democrat, but many of those things are things that she's campaigning on. And we saw that the establishment Black Democrats threw everything they had to stop her in Ohio and put Shontel Brown in the Congress, who people say, well, they agree. No, Nina Turner is very different. Now, I'm asking is in that
context, but I would rather, but ideally, really what I would rather see is along with that platform as a beginnings of a basis, I would like to see an actual mass exodus from the Democratic Party. I wouldn't advocate supporting her or anybody else. And let's, again, to your point, heighten some of these contradictions and see what happens. Thank you. But my point is really, and I want to reemphasize this to be very clear, because I don't claim to have this all figured out. No, what I request, my main point for gathering with you tonight, Dr. Carr, is again that I'm humbly requesting that as you make your response to my argument or others in wherever space you go, that you be mindful and more appreciative of the histories and the traditions that lead some of us to want to raise these radical or at least different ideas or concepts. Because the more you can advocate that people at least consider it, the more we might actually see one day where we're doing something and moving in ways that would be truly threatening in a way that is commensurate with the histories and the people we claim. I mean, everything, we always, as much as we talk about Dr. King and others, we always leave out his calls for direct action. We could, there are general strikes, shutting down municipalities, simply joining organizations and seeing what happens when people study and become politically educated off camera and off mic. Any number of, anyway, that kind of work is what I think we should be more inclined to do, and to be reminded and encouraged that whatever people do with their vote, that is can't be all that they do. It has to be a bare minimum. And yeah, so I would just advocate that political education, political organization, offline, and then we'll see what comes of what. But there are a number. I mean, again, the histories of Black liberation, the labor movement, and many others, just within this country, within the United States alone, point to a wide array of beautiful radical struggle that goes beyond electoral politics, and that might be meaningful to people as they figure out what we're going to do next in this generation.
I think it's a false choice. I think we can do the organizing, the study. We have to do it, and I think King is a great example. At the same time, that we don't withdraw from any battlefield that might advance us. And that in a two-party system, in the country that we live in, where we are not yet prepared to engage at a critical mass in the type of, whether it be armed struggle, whether it be collective economic action, and you can make the argument that we haven't really seen boycott be effective, frankly, since Montgomery. Because even when you read King, even in Where Do We Go From Here? Well, for that matter, go all the way back. Go to the book that he wrote after Stride Toward Freedom, after the Montgomery bus boycott. By the time you get to Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos Community, 1968, King's political philosophy is clear, but he never withdraws from the battle in electoral politics. If he did, there wouldn't have been, arguably, with mass support, and the masses never have benefited to the degree that even he would have seen, even before he was killed, to the Voting Rights Act of 65, the Civil Rights Act of 64. And I certainly don't hear anybody tonight saying that legislation shouldn't have been passed, or that it would not have existed absent mass struggle, or that was the ultimate objective. Now, anybody saying that, certainly I wouldn't agree with them. That's certainly not the ultimate objective. But I think King is a great example of the fact that everything except withdrawal that I heard you say, Jared, is something that could, should, in fact, must occur. But that doesn't exclude continuing to struggle in those places where policy and law affect the comings and goings in the real lives of people who suffer in this radically racist capitalist system, that militaristic system that King was organized against. I'm just saying, and maybe I don't, and again, I mean, the reason I quoted Lenin earlier was I wasn't quoting what is to be done. I'm quoting Abdul Al-Kalamat, because I'm be quite frankly with you. Lenin, Marx, Mao, all of them. You go down the list, right? I think that it's no need for me to enter those conversations, except I'm going to come in through a Max Stanford, since you named Max in Philly, of course, and you say Ram. I'm going to come in through a CLR James. I'm not going to come in through those other folks. They're not Bibles. We're not talking about Bibles. But I'm saying in the case of Martin Luther King, I think that's a great example of somebody who, at least as I read him and think about him, including, and I'm glad y'all had that conversation, a little bit of conversation about Andrew Douglas in that book, the little new book on King, where it opens where King tells Andy Young to shut up because you're a capitalist and I'm not. You understand what I'm saying? And then, of course, King is assassinated and Andrew Young becomes the patron saint of Black bourgeois neoliberal work. And that's not what Dr. King was talking about. But I don't think Dr. King would have said that. I don't know that he would have disagreed with anything you put on that list, with the exception, perhaps. I can't speak for King. I'll speak for myself. I certainly wouldn't agree with withdrawal. We should concede any battlefront. That's what
I do think that I do think that we probably disagree on what King has to say in Chaos or Community about the vote, and that in his but primarily where I think we disagree.
I'm just talking about what he wrote. I'm not talking about what he would do today, because the man been.
No, I know. I'm talking about what he wrote. I'm talking about what he wrote,
okay,
and I'm
good.
saying that I don't remember. my memory or my reading of it isn't that he was advocating. He certainly wasn't advocating the lesser of evil voting. In fact, it was more of, again, he was advocating that we engage electoral politics more akin to what I'm trying to advocate today.
Yeah.
Again, a lot of the argument that comes to the Black community is we have to vote for the lesser of evil because they're lesser of evil. King was saying we need guaranteed income. He said Black businesses and buying Black and banking Black and all that will be insufficient. The federal government has to get involved and redistribute the wealth. We don't advocate that. We're not approaching the vote. We didn't approach voting for Biden or Obama or Clinton before him. We didn't approach voting for them, on that basis. We approached voting for them on the basis because we were being told they're not Bush, they're not Trump, they're not Reagan. They're not. That was the whole. And then immediately we saw from Clinton on, in terms of my voting career, immediately that working people, Black people, the world majority overall got nothing and got abuse and more violence and inequality and all that, and then we've devolved to where we are. So that's what I'm saying. So all I'm saying is,
you keep saying nothing. I'm trying to understand how that actually. I mean,
what do you mean? I'm saying nothing. You referenced King, and I'm saying what King actually. And I'm saying my reading of King.
We keep getting nothing. I mean, I think that we has to be qualified.
Well, okay, so look, you've made a couple references to this, I'm not really clear on what you mean by this. But when I'm saying the Black community, I'm thinking of the way economic data is put together.
Okay.
So if you don't, if there's some other, if you're suggesting that community doesn't exist, or if we're doing something else, I don't know.
No, capitalism.
But when I'm saying,
I'm not saying. I was thinking when I'm thinking, and that's good. Let me just say quickly, I'm thinking more along the lines of the most vulnerable and the things that, like, for example, we know this administration of justice is absolutely racist and it's absolutely draconian. But I'm saying, I think there's enough of a difference between the parties that I think it would be worse. I think it would be worse under an openly fascist regime. And I'm not saying, I'm not defending any of the parties. That's what I'm saying. I'm not caping for the Democrats.
But that's the other thing. So but again, like George Jackson was right that fascism was here 50 years ago. So I don't understand where this narrative that was evolved that Trump is somehow some brand new super evil that has never existed.
Keep saying things I didn't say.
No, but because you keep making reference in the same way that I'm arguing needs to stop to the Republican Party as a fascist Nazi party, as if they're that much worse than the Democratic Party. So where we definitely disagree is that you're saying that there has been significant difference and change from the Democratic Party, and I'm saying there has been woefully insignificant and insufficient change from the Democratic Party. So, and I am talking about whether it's my own lived experience or those particularly of the students that I teach and deal with on a daily basis. I mean, wouldn't these, to use your same line of argumentation, wouldn't these communities do much better if they had a guaranteed income and national health care and a minimum wage? Okay. Because we can't get it by voting for the lesser of evil, and by voting for
we can get it by not voting at all in the two-party system.
I'm saying I'm saying eventually it wouldn't come any sooner than voting for the Democrats. I'm saying we got to do. That's why I'm saying if people had done something differently in the 1950s, if people had followed Du Bois then, maybe by now we would be better off.
That's good. We know Du Bois left. We know Du Bois left the country, but I also know that if we withdraw from the two-party system, how do you see this playing out? Because I'll tell you in 30 seconds how I see this playing out. The federal polity is getting ready to disintegrate. The federal polity is getting ready to disintegrate. When they cancel Roe in some ways is a prelude to the type of attack on federalism that we saw in the 1850s with Dred Scott. In other words, take the specific issue out and introduce the impact on the federal polity. I'm saying I don't see that as a bad thing necessarily. I'm saying that California, when you see Gavin Newsom say, I'm looking at Texas and the way that they're going to deputize everybody in Texas to basically bankrupt people if they try to help somebody terminate a pregnancy, I'm going to use that same legal argument to go for the guns in California when they superheat the Constitution, particularly the Second Amendment. What I anticipate happening is there's going to be a fracture in this country. and it will look closer to the 1860s. It's not going to be the 1860s because that's the 1860s. But what you will see is it's going to be safer to live in Maryland and California than it is to live in Texas, Georgia, Mississippi, places where you have enough people, if organized, that they could literally take over. What you see even at the local level, whether it be Jackson, whether it be Birmingham, you name any of these cities, and I've named Jackson because I know that Chokwe, that Antar isn't left enough, even for some of the Black people he organized with. You see what I'm saying? But I also know that the state of Mississippi is determined to shut Jackson down. And I'm saying that if this thing fractures, we're going to see something, we're going to be faced with a fight. And if we're faced with a fight like that, then yeah, we got to go get the strap. And at that point, everybody putting the books down. But I think that's the direction we're going in. If that's what we need to do, then yeah, we'll draw from the two parties and let's just
if voting for Democrats is really the only thing keeping us from that, then we should definitely be getting ready because they're not a barrier. They're not a defense against that.
That's easy, man. You build at the local level. That's always been the case. That's always been the case. When I think of how we think, when Ralph Bunche said in 35 that the Negro is a special ward of the Supreme Court, we have to understand that. And again, I mean, we don't have all this figured out, and I'm not here. I mean, this is just a conversation we're having. I think it's valuable, and I would agree with Adolph Reed on this, particularly like in his latest book, The South, when he talks about this. Apartheid retarded the class divisions that would have naturally formed in the Black community. When you see the legal assault on segregation, that served the Black bourgeois, that tiny group that they have been trying to cultivate since the end of the Civil War. This is why Booker T. Washington was picked, right? And so I'm saying all that to say that power has always come from local organizing and people coming together. I mean, we throw names around, we throw titles around. We say, well, Carr G. Woodson, Miseducation of the Negro. When you read Miseducation of the Negro, this is a guy that worked in a coal mine who happened to get a PhD from Harvard, who is engaged in a class critique on every page of that book as he sees what's developing. These Negroes getting ready to lead a community. Except they're going to use the jet fuel. Now I'm thinking about Cedric Robinson, not even so much Black Marxism as his little book, Black Movements in America, where you see this small petty bourgeois group of Black people using the jet fuel of the masses organized to smash Jim Crow to escape the community. And I guess what I'm saying is power, it doesn't diminish the potential power of our communities when we organize, when we do that hard work. And I am in full agreement. Well, let me not say that because you didn't say this. I'm going to say it. I won't say I'm going to agree with something you didn't say because you didn't say this, but what I'm about to say. I'm saying that elective representatives should be used the way every other organized community uses them. You use them as tools. These are not celebrities. We don't have to like or dislike them. And I'm saying when we do that, we are then using electoral politics the right way, either to keep some people off our ass, whether it be getting a zoning permit, whether being able to organize and do a fundraiser, if you want to have, and I agree with you, got to raise that money to make sure our ex-political prisoners and our freedom fighters can, in their old age, sit and dispense wisdom and have some place to sleep and eat comfortably. If that means we got to get a law changed at the local level because policy comes from law and lawmakers are elected, then let's put a tool in there to do it. I learned that of all groups of people. I'm not even going to get into that. That's a Philly conversation. And so put it this way, I won't name the ethnic group. All I will say is in conversation, I learned very quickly in the city of Philadelphia when I said, well, how come this group isn't on city council representative? And the person told me, and the community leader said to me, why would we want to be in the council when we own the politician? The whole point is local power can dictate the terms of electoral politics. And I think that's where the power comes from. And that comes from organizing. And that's not campaign season. That's that hard ass work. So I don't,
and that's why I'm saying we need arguments and discussions that go beyond shut up and vote for the lesser of evil because we're going to get Nazis elected. That's all I'm saying. So like, I would also say to that last point that's why I don't think we can use Democrats as tools. Because they are bought and owned already by communities we can never catch up to economically. So the only power we have is the collective power of numbers, an organized strength and the potential willingness to engage, as Dr. King advocated, in direct action, to engage in any number of different forms of unsanctioned behavior that again heightens contradictions, forces things to be confronted in different ways, and encourages, more importantly, our communities to become more radically organized and involved. That's it. So that's why I don't, yeah. So that would be it. That's why, anyway, that's why I don't think we can use the Democratic Party. They're not tools we can use. And I think that's been proven over and over again. I mean, it's
I don't think so. But we just had to agree to disagree. That's cool.
Sure. Okay. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.